I'm almost 30 and can now recoup all the wedding gifts I've given in the past. I've decided to marry a handsome, wealthy man. Talking about my job, future plans, and kids, I felt like I really hit it off with my mill. After the wedding and coming back from our honeymoon, my mill turned on me. Susan, what was with that wedding? It wasn't necessary to make it so extravagant. My mill started showing her true colors just 5 days after the wedding. I felt something stirring inside of me. Something inside me felt like it was peeking out and looking around. Then, like a dragon breathing fire, something erupted from within me. Who do you think you are? Want me to grab a knife? LOL. When did you start thinking you're my mother? Huh? My name is Susan White, 29 years old. Right now, many of my friends are in the midst of a wedding boom. In busier months, there's a wedding every weekend. So I've been spending a lot on gifts. Well, you'll get it all back. Someone might have said that to me. Until now, that hadn't happened for me. I wonder if I'll really get it all back. I work as a buyer for a chain store. Last year, I was in charge of local products in New York, and the products I procured were the top sellers. Due to the company's focus on expanding overseas products, I've been promoted to handle international procurement this year. Apparently, I'm the company's first female in this role. I've been so busy and fulfilled that I didn't have time for dating. I missed out on many mixers due to business trips. Considering my job keeps me away from home for almost half the year, that might be a reason. During one of my international trips, I had an unexpected encounter. Embarrassingly, it all started with a clumsy mistake of mine. While abroad, I realized I'd left my small bag somewhere. When I found it, I realized my wallet and passport had been stolen. Lost and distressed, a kind voice addressed me. The person who approached me was a Japanese man who had been in this area for about 2 years on an exchange program. I told Bob everything, and thanks to his help, a potential problem was avoided. That day, he treated me to a meal and even gave me a lift to where I was staying. He was truly a breath of fresh air and such a gentleman. It was either fate or pure coincidence that I met him again in Japan 6 months later. When I attended a mixer I was invited to by a friend, the person seated right in front of me was him. At first, I couldn't believe it, but after he mentioned having returned from studying abroad and ordered the same drink he had when he treated me to dinner the other day, I was convinced that he was the man who had helped me back then, because there were so many similarities. Maybe it was just me, but I felt like he was watching me throughout the whole party. After a while, when a seat next to me became vacant, he came over and started chatting. "You're the one who lost your passport, right?" I was a bit annoyed, thinking couldn't he remember me in some other way. Seeing this, he laughed and said, "I approached you because you were just my type of American woman back then." Eventually, his words cheered me up, and as a way to thank him for that time, we exchanged stories and finally swapped contact details. We met up a few times after that, and he took the initiative to confess his feelings. We began dating. His name is Bob Anderson. Though he's 2 years younger, he's very mature and overflowing with kindness. Whenever I returned from international business trips, he would always come to pick me up at the airport in his bright red sports car. Our relationship was going smoothly, and we were discussing marriage. My sister is getting married this year, so maybe we can plan ours for next year. That was fine with me. Bob and I discussed our wedding and our future together. He then came to visit my parents' home. My parents gave him the warmest welcome. My mom, who rarely wears makeup, had put some on, and my dad was dressed in a suit, even wearing a tie. It seemed they had ordered takeout. There was a huge platter of sushi on the table, though my dad is usually reserved, and I never really knew what he thought about me. He said, "Please take good care of my daughter. Don't ever make her sad." It was the first time I heard him say that. I realized how much my parents cherished me, and tears welled up. On the next holiday, I went to visit Bob's home. I wore a new dress I bought especially for this occasion. Upon arrival, I took a deep breath to calm my nerves and followed Bob into his family's home. Meeting his parents for the first time, his dad was dressed casually in sweats, and his mom was in relaxed home clothes. There was a big bowl on the table filled with individually wrapped trail mix. "Sorry about the wedding. Bob's sister got engaged first. That's okay. In our family, we also got married in age order. You get to travel a lot for work, right? That's so enviable. It'd be a waste not to continue such a job even after getting married. When a woman settles down, it becomes hard to travel freely. Thank you for understanding. But we do hope for grandchildren. Well, we're not exactly sure when that'll happen, but we promise to have kids. We're thinking maybe after my current project wraps up. I'm also looking forward to having grandchildren. Given our age, we can't take too much time. I'm sorry to ask this of you. Well, our family has run a traditional clothing store since the colonial era. We hope someone will continue to carry on the legacy. There are many factors, like having an heir. We just want more options. There's Bob's sister, Vanessa, and others. We don't mind who takes over. It's easier if you're upfront about it. We're serious about having children. I promise I'll quit my job once we have kids." That's reassuring to hear. But do your job well until then. Once you have kids, you'll just quit anyway. So don't work with such a half-hearted attitude. I understand that sentiment. The day ended on a pleasant note. I was nervous and utterly exhausted. It was good to discuss work and children with my mill. I was relieved to find that there wasn't a significant difference between my opinion and my mill's. I felt we were getting along quite well. However, a few weeks later, an incident occurred. Bob's brother-in-law, who was about to become part of our family, had an accident at work. I was on a business trip and couldn't go to the hospital that day. After returning, Bob drove me from the airport to the hospital where I greeted his sister, Vanessa, and her fiancé. While it wasn't life-threatening, they said he wouldn't be discharged in time for the wedding. Booking the popular wedding venue was the one condition Vanessa wouldn't budge on for her marriage. The venue she had reserved was a recent talk of the town. We considered it as an option, but a suitable date would have been years away, so we removed it from our list. Vanessa contacted the venue staff and managed to secure another good date. Eventually, Vanessa's wedding was rescheduled to take place 2 months after ours. Should we postpone our wedding for a year? Bob must have been trying to be considerate of his mother and Vanessa. I was pretty uneasy. You don't have to worry about that, right? Vanessa doesn't mind either. Don't concern yourself with it. If you did that, we'd feel indebted to you forever. Honestly, I was relieved. Work plans are moving along this schedule. Changing it now would alter everything, and changing the date seemed unrealistic. Our wedding took place as planned. It was held at the most popular hotel in the area. Being an only child and having parents who loved grandeur and showing off, my wedding was designed to be lavish and splendid. Doves flying, the bride and groom descending from a gondola, a popular performance involving making traditional rice cakes. The crowning glory was a 6-tire wedding cake. My relatives were overjoyed with applause. This is the most fun wedding I've ever attended. It seemed like Bob's relatives enjoyed and clapped, which made me feel relieved. I was worried if they would understand. After the wedding, we had plans for our honeymoon. After hastily preparing in our hotel room, we caught the afternoon flight to Italy. We enjoyed sightseeing, shopping for souvenirs, and had a wonderful honeymoon before returning to the US. The sushi we ate at the airport upon our return was so delicious. After returning home, We invited my in-laws to our place to share about our honeymoon. Weren't you on a business trip, Susan? I was thinking of cooking for you today. No business trips this month. What will you make? I didn't prepare anything because I thought Bob and I might order pizza. If you're offering to cook, that would be wonderful. Well, pizza sounds good, but then I'll need to use your kitchen, Susan. Bob doesn't eat raw fish, so maybe I'll make something with cooked fish. I didn't know Bob couldn't eat raw fish. Why on earth did we have sushi on our way back from our honeymoon? Did he do that to be considerate of me? Mom's fried fish is delicious, so remember to make it, Susan. I'll make sure to learn. It'd be a waste just to watch. Can I help with something? Then, can you peel the radish for me? Be careful. Do you want me to lend you this? Oh, I got it. No, I'm good. I'll use a knife. You're not using the peeler. It's convenient. They don't sell this around here. I had to wait 6 months to order it online. I always peel with a knife, so I don't have a peeler at my place. I smoothly peeled the radish's skin with a knife. My chef father taught me that. Until recently, I thought anyone could do this. Well, yay. My Mill was using the peeler she brought from her home to shred the cabbage, but she stopped and tried using a knife, which didn't go well. You can't cut it properly. Let me help. I quickly started chopping the cabbage finely. You're pretty good at this. All right, I'll leave this to you, Susan. Despite our back and forth, we managed to finish cooking. We enjoyed the conversation over the spread of dishes and some wine. However, after my Mill had a bit of alcohol, she started nitpicking for the first time. Susan, what was with that wedding? Honestly, I was shocked. It's not just about being flashy, you know. I'm sorry. In my parents' hometown, it's a tradition to have a grand wedding, so it was quite normal. My brother's wedding 5 years ago even had a parade float, and it was amazing. If you'd like, I can show you the video of my brother's wedding. You'll understand. Sure, it might have been a bit too flashy, but calling it foolish is rude. She seemed happy at the time. I don't need to see that video. You lack common sense and consideration for others. I felt so humiliated. I remember my Mill saying she'd never been to such a fun wedding. She even got invited on stage and danced joyfully during a traditional dance performance. I was shocked to realize she might not have actually enjoyed it. Enough of that already. You always stay silent. You never speak up unless it's moments like this. If you don't, things will just escalate. It's unbearable. My Mill had been looking for opportunities to belittle me ever since the wedding, which was just 5 days ago. Well, we won't have another wedding, so there's no chance for things to escalate. While we're on the subject, do you not have kids yet? Please have a healthy baby boy. I can recommend a good gynecologist. Make sure to visit them starting tomorrow. I talked to you about this the other day. Bob and I decided to think about kids once my current project is over. We discussed leaving it to nature, and you're too laid back about this. The sooner, the better. The clinic is in New York City, so it might be a bit of a hassle to commute, but do your best. That clinic has a good reputation for gender selection. That's where I gave birth to Bob. I felt something stir inside me. It takes over an hour to get to that clinic from our new place. Bob has decided to quit his job next year and take over the family's clothing store. Really? I hadn't heard about it. I hadn't told you yet, but I always thought he'd eventually take over. I wondered why Bob would make such an important decision with his Mill without telling me. So you should learn from me and help Bob run the clothing store. Maybe starting next month would be good. Regarding that, as I mentioned the other day, I don't plan on quitting my job. Can I manage both? What are you talking about? You think running the store is some kind of side gig? Obviously, you can't continue with your current job. What do you mean? I looked at him. He was going to take over eventually. It's just happening a bit sooner. I was trained strictly by my Mill, and I remember how challenging it was. It's exciting. Well, if you couldn't even use a knife or properly peel a carrot, I bet your mill had a hard time with you. Something inside me started to stir. Susan, did you say something? Yes. Did you hear me? Are you trying to push that hard and unfamiliar job onto me? You plan to bully me under the pretext of strict training because I'm not experienced. Knowing how tough it is, I can't just jump into it. The moment you became Bob's wife, this was set in stone. Being the wife of the eldest son of a clothing store means this. Why are you questioning it now? Calm down, Mom. Susan, I get that this might be shocking news to you, but Mom wants us to carry on the family business. She doesn't want it to end with her. Understand? I get it. You don't want to fold a clothing store with a legacy that dates back to the colonial era during my time, right? I understand, but you said we could think about kids after this project is over, right? And you said it'd be best if I continued working even after getting married. Didn't you? Why was everything decided without even consulting me? I have no clue when this project of yours is going to end. You continued working even after the wedding, didn't you? It's not about discussing. I want you to do what's been decided. I didn't want your opinion. If you didn't like it, you shouldn't have had a wedding in the first place. After seeing our grand wedding party, Vanessa even said she wanted to cancel her wedding. Jacob came to me and said, I can't afford such a lavish wedding, so please let me break up with Vanessa. It was tough dealing with that. My irritation started to turn into words, and I felt like I was about to blow up. Oh, is that so? It's all about how you phrase it, isn't it? My apologies, but I believe I provided you with a wedding plan. I told you then to let me know if there was anything you'd like to omit, right? Then, when you said, oh, you're doing the square dance. It's pretty famous in my hometown of Texas, but it can get loud. I invited you onto the stage. I must admit that dance was unexpected, but thanks to that, the venue was lively. Are you making fun of me now? How rude. That's the way we dance in my region. I didn't expect such a dance at a wedding, so it was a surprise. You're really rude. I'm genuinely concerned for the child you'll raise. Are the gender selection clinics okay? The Anderson family also had Bob as their second child, right? That's why I found this good clinic. I'm not sure how they're determining the gender of their baby, but I wouldn't go to a hospital recommended by parents who couldn't even teach their child to protect their wife. I'll think about my future with both you and Bob. Who do you think you are? I'm so mad I'm thirsty. Bring me some tea, LOL. Bob glanced at me and said, just casually hydrating, huh? Both my Phil and Bob looked a bit taken aback. How were you raised by your parents? Do you think it's okay to talk to Mel like that? It's all true, isn't it? At least call me Mrs. Anderson. Heck. Since when have you acted like my mother, or mistaken yourself for being my mother? What on earth are you talking about? You're Susan, right? You and Bob had a silly wedding, didn't you? My Mill just laughed in disbelief. I slammed 2 papers onto the table. They were unmistakably a marriage license and a certificate of marriage. Everything was filled out and stamped, just waiting to be submitted. I had a wedding with Bob, but I hadn't submitted the marriage documents yet. What do you mean? I was on a business trip until the day before the wedding, and I completely forgot to submit them. I'm sorry. Bob had asked me to submit them. I found these papers while shopping at the supermarket today. I sometimes mess up at crucial moments like this. I realized I'd forgotten to submit them when I found them in my bag. I was planning to do it tomorrow. Maybe I saw this coming. Maybe it was fate. Saying that, I ripped the 2 papers into pieces. That's why I'm saying goodbye today. Bye. I'll come to get my stuff later. Shredded papers from the marriage documents fluttered in the air. Susan, you mean we only had the ceremony and didn't register our marriage? Yes. Good for us, right? We aren't legally married. Say hi to that young lady for me. What are you talking about? She's like a sister to me. having worked in the family business for years. You're misunderstanding something, Susan. Bob, she's not right for you, Susan. If you think Bob acted in a way that made you suspicious, I'm truly sorry. They were just raised together like siblings. Oh, really? Well, whatever. Saying that, I grabbed my phone and ran out of the new house. I had nowhere to go at this hour. Bob kept calling and texting me. That night, I stayed at a nearby hotel and went home early the next morning. It caused quite a commotion when I returned to my parents' house in the morning. What's wrong with that? You're Mill, and also Bob. Can't he stand up to his mom's decisions? Seems so. I expected that eventually he'd take over the family's clothing store. But starting from next month, isn't that a bit rushed? I decided to meet with Bob outside due to his persistent attempts to contact me. Can you come back to me? Why do you want me to come back? Well, we had the wedding, and we lived together for a few days. Okay, but in return, please cut ties with your family, especially your parents. That's difficult right now. We can decide not to take over the family business, though. It's too late. After that argument with your mother, there's no way I can go back. Please come back. Would you consider living with my parents if we got married? Give me some time to think about it. Bob's such a mama's boy. He's probably going to discuss it with his parents. I was becoming curious about what he'd say next. 2 days later, he reached out to meet at a local coffee shop for a second discussion. Please come back, Susan. I'll do as you say. Bob seemed more pressured than last time. I wonder what was said to him. My curiosity grew. What happened? Did something go wrong? I pretended to be genuinely concerned while asking. It's nothing. Just come back. Please, I'll accept any condition you have, Susan. I could tell he wasn't being completely honest, so I decided to play along a bit. Bob, you look pale. What's wrong? Saying this, I overlapped my hand on Bob's and peered into his face. I can't hide anything from you, Susan. Did he really fall for that? The inner Susan in me cheered. My sister broke up with Jacob. My mother wanted Jacob to take over the family's dress shop, but Jacob had no intention of doing so. He didn't want to inherit the house or the business. As a result, they're being sued for a large sum of money. If we go back and take over, not only will my sister be happy, but the family business will also be secure. That's why I'm begging you. Please come back. Jacob made the right choice, didn't he? Spending a lifetime with a demanding mother like that. He should be grateful, if anything. You haven't officially gotten married yet, right? No paperwork. It's good neither of us has that on our records. There's a reason my sister needs to marry Jacob. Didn't they receive a loan from Jacob's family? It would be funny if only the father-in-law knew and not the mill. That's exactly what happened. How did you know? Wasn't Jacob in a private room when he was hospitalized? Only rich folks or criminals would be in private rooms for such minor injuries. And Jacob is wealthy. So, is the dress shop going under? It'll be fine if you come back, Susan. Please, I want you to return. I had no intention of going back, but I played along to hear more of the story. If things are so bad, give me your conditions. I'll think it over. I was intrigued by this drama. After returning from an overseas trip, I got a call from Bob to meet again. I've got the conditions. Please accept them. The terms he presented, like 2 days off a week and 10 paid vacation days, were quite appealing. I told him I'd get back to him in a few days, and we parted ways. I took a couple of days off and moved out when I thought Bob would be at work. At the office, a friend asked, "Heard you forgot to file your marriage papers, and the mill-to-be was too much to handle." Where did she hear that? Though it's surprising how fast word travels. She's absolutely right. Everyone at work said, "That must have been tough. Good thing you didn't get married. You dodged a bullet." After moving, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered the phone, it was Bob's mother. Susan, what on earth were you thinking? You said you'd come for your things later. What happened to that? And you've embarrassed Bob as well. What's your intention? Bob's been cooped up ever since. And after all the preparations for the wedding, you're breaking it off. Don't you have the patience to wait things out? Vanessa stormed out of the house in anger. Accept the conditions given by Bob and come back ASAP. Back in my day. Click. Why should I care? It's not my responsibility. The one who turned her back right after the wedding was Bob's mother. She was amicable until the marriage. But once it was sealed, she started pushing everything onto me. Such an unpleasant character. It's obvious that the negotiation terms Bob thought of were lies. Was I supposed to be okay with only weekends off and 10 paid leave days a year? I sensed the conversation was going to drag on, so I hung up midway. And while I was at it, I added Bob's and his mother's numbers to my block list. I could have waited on a rock for 3 years, but I can't stand being around you for even a second. Rumors quickly spread at work that the engagement broke off because Bob was a mama's boy, and apparently, he lost his standing at work and resigned voluntarily. How oblivious can this mama's boy be to become a shut-in over this? Just the thought of ever having feelings for such a guy makes my skin crawl. I want to forget about it as soon as possible. That young lady at the fabric store was actually Bob's younger sister, my Mill's daughter. My Mill had given birth to 3 children, but since they were all girls, she was afraid of what her own Mill would do if she found out. So she gave them up for adoption to someone she knew right after they were born. When the former Mill passed away, she hired her back with special treatment. The long-established fabric store that no longer talked about the loan apparently filed for bankruptcy. It seems to be quite resilient. The issue had blown up to such an extent that it was covered in news programs, and Mill was being interviewed. Curious about what she would say, I stopped what I was doing and focused on the TV. Which channel are you from? I won't watch you again. Getting interviewed as she glamorously dressed in high brands and was about to get into a luxury German car driven by Bob seemed to have irked many. Following this coverage, social media blew up with numerous posts about verbal abuse towards part-timers, unpaid wages, and forcing employees to work for 30 days straight at the fabric store. Whether it's true or not, it shows the negative impression the store had left on the public. The store near my home has been shuttered. I continue to travel overseas for business meetings. One day, on a return flight, I happened to sit next to a man, and we're now married and expecting a baby boy next year. I'm so excited. Of course, this time I've taken care of all the necessary paperwork. I'm over the moon with happiness.